Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm Eliana Kernodle. The University of California system has rolled out a new harassment prevention mandate requiring all students to complete training that affirms transgender policies, or they might face class registration blocks. Joining me to tell us more about this is the Center Square's education reporter, Esther Wickham. Esther, tell us about this new mandated training.
Yeah, thanks, Eliana. So, the UC system, the University of California system, has implemented this new program. It's called SHAPE. It's an acronym for Sexual Harassment, Anti Discrimination, Prevention, and Education. And not all the UC schools have accepted this, but a majority of them have for this fall semester. And it essentially is a training kind of test that all students are required to take, and it's mandatory. And the questions are kind of trainings on gender identity and kind of non-discrimination policies. And essentially, this program is designed for the UC schools to create a safe and cultivating environment for transgender students, for students that are struggling with their gender identity, and for the state to recognize, as a whole, as a community, we want to come together and we want to implement this training so that not only the students that are struggling with this and maybe feel unsafe feel safe, but also students that may disagree or have a different view can be trained and updated on what are ways to avoid being labeled as someone that's harassing or discriminating against other students, whether that be using incorrect transgender pronouns, which the training would claim can cause a hostile environment and be accused of harassment. And so some of the questions that the training kind of talks about is you can create a hostile environment, and you may, if someone demands to be called a certain pronoun or use a particular bathroom, and someone else is intentionally using the wrong pronouns and intentionally saying we don't want you in this particular bathroom, this may be a form of sexual harassment, and it's all about how the student is perceived. If someone feels threatened by someone else for not using the right pronouns, that essentially is felt and deemed as sexual harassment. And so this training, in order for students to pass, they have to get 100%. So one of the questions asked, it kind of gives like an example. It says a student, they are transgender, another student isn't complying, and in turn that transgender student feels disrespected by this other student not complying with how they live their life. And there is a multiple choice question, and the correct and only correct answer is that what is the student doing? It is the student is creating a hostile environment. And so students are asked these kinds of questions as a sort of, training tool. But there has been some pushback because in order to register for the next semester, this upcoming spring semester, all students are mandated to take this training test, and they all must get 100%. So essentially, a lot of conservative groups have kind of come back and pushed back and said, well, if we disagree, if they're religious or if they have a belief system that goes against what is, considered, this is my opinion, this is my view, not necessarily I'm harassing you. They're basically saying these trainings programs are kind of fear mongering and in preventing them from registering for classes simply because they don't agree with some of the training questions.
A UC spokesperson said something to the contrary. What did they have to say?
So looking on the website, the UCI website, it says, this is straight from the website. Students must score 100% on the online test. Failure blocks registration for the following semester. And this is off of the Office of Equal Opportunity and Diversity. Well, I reached out to the communications department for the UC system in general. And this is what the UC spokesperson had to say. These students are required to take these harassment prevention trainings, but there's no penalty for enrollment. She said explicitly in her quote, there's no penalty for enrollment, and choosing other options, is an option. Like we allow that. It specifically says failure blocks registration. So there is a penalty, and a lot of other conservative groups, the California Family Council, has pointed that out, saying you're threatening to not allow students to register for the next semester simply because they disagree. It is harassment, and it is wrong for someone to kind of follow someone around and yell at them and scream at them, but simply just saying on a test, on a training, questionnaire thing, no, I don't think it's a hostile environment to say, "Hey, I disagree with your pronouns. I disagree with the way that you live your life." That's just a difference of opinion, and that's exactly what the vice president of the California Family Council said, Greg Burt, in a statement, kind of pushing back. He says that universities are a dangerous place when they start treating disagreement as harassment. These places should be a place of learning, of places where civil discourse is invited, not become engines of indoctrination. And he goes on to say, silencing biblical beliefs about gender and sexuality, it's not tolerance, it's tyranny. And so what California Family Council is really getting at is, they're no better silencing these conservatives that are just trying to share their own opinions, and their response is that they get barred from classes in the next semester. And this program comes out of, it's not just the UC system thinking this up. This comes from an Assembly Bill 2608 in California, which is back in 2020 state law requiring students to complete sexual harassment and discrimination training with these updated terms and definitions. So in the past, this is a common, actions. Students should have education for Title IX requirements, and they should be aware of what's going on when it comes to sexual harassment and discrimination on campus. But to take this extra step to update terms and definitions on what a harassment and discrimination looks like in the context of civil discourse and disagreement is where a lot of conservative groups and parental advocacy groups see the issue.
Well, Esther, thank you for your insights on this story. You can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.